Wake up, Twins territory, and welcome to another edition of Twins Hangouts. We're coming at you on a Wednesday night, little special edition, and we're coming a little late because my computer was being stupid, and that's about all I'm going to say about that. Uh, we have on the line with us right now Seth Stowes, as always, the brains of the operation, and we're joined by Twins starting pitcher and former Missouri Tiger, Kyle Gibson. And this is where I would pipe in some clapping, but I had so many other things going on that I couldn't do that. So Kyle, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, absolutely. Good to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we kind of figured it would be a good week after Missouri beat Florida 42-13 this week. We figured we'd find you in a good mood.
Yeah, had you guys asked last week after the beatdown Georgia gave us, I probably would have declined.
All right, well, maybe we should just get right to this, Kyle, since obviously you're in the Eastern time zone, so we don't want to take up too much of your time. We got a couple questions that the Twins Daily site will get to, but I wanted to start just kind of your season. 13 wins, almost 180 innings. What are you most excited about your 2014 season?
I think for me, one of my goals was to obviously just contribute as much as possible to the team, but part of that was staying up there all year long and making the adjustments throughout the year, to allow myself to stay up there all year long. And I think at times, it was pretty up and down, and at times I showed some flashes of consistency. And towards the end of the year, even though I was getting a little tired, I made a few adjustments there to my weekly routine, which helped me the last 4 starts or 3 starts. But I think I learned a lot. Maybe about as much as I learned all year at the end of the year. With the starts against Detroit at home, the start against I think it was maybe Anaheim at home. A couple starts where I didn't have my best stuff or got in trouble at some point and was able to work through 6 or 7 innings, and that's something I've got to do more often next year.
Hey, at Twins Fest, the Twins had just signed Phil Hughes and Ricky Nolasco and brought Mike Pelfrey back, and really there was one spot open, and you made the comment at that time, well, I'm glad there's one spot that I can compete for. At the same time, you were competing really with 3 guys that were out of options. What was really, you say the right things, but what was going through your mind during that time, during spring training, as far as the business side versus what you could do to control making the roster and then eventually making the roster?
Well, I think, going into spring training 2013, I don't think I had the right mindset, and I think I learned from that. I think had I thrown well at the beginning of spring training in 2013, I had a chance to, possibly break with the club out of spring training. But I think I was just worrying about that too much and pressing and not just going out there and pitching. And this year, it's easy to find out the business side of things because you see it all over the internet. So I kind of knew going into it that there were guys without options, and I knew what that meant in the baseball business world. And but for me, it didn't really matter if I didn't throw well. So that's really all I tried to do was just go out and show that I had made improvements and show that I had making the step and showed that I was ready to be there. And but at the end of the day, if I didn't throw the ball well, then they weren't going to keep me over those guys with no options. But it luckily it just worked out, and I threw the ball well enough for them to give me a chance.
Going back to spring training, you became a father for the first time. Talk about that, and at the same time, how did that affect your pitching? Did it affect your makeup in any way? We always hear about you become a parent. It changes you. Do you think it affected you in any way?
I think I don't know that it affected me on the field really anyway. I'm sure it gave me a little bit less rest at night, but everybody knows how that goes. But it was just a blessing. it was one of those things that it would have been great to go through it, in the middle of the season, in the off season, in spring training, I think it definitely puts things in perspective, and it gave me a chance to just step back and kind of enjoy life there for a couple days, even though I was still working toward making the team. But I think it did kind of change my perspective. I've always tried to keep a good perspective on baseball, and I love baseball, and I have a passion to play, and I want to be the best I can. But Seth, you and I have talked a lot, and I mean, I also realize that baseball isn't everything in my life, and being a father has been another part of my life that's expanded and has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I got a quick one for you.
Mm-hmm.
Did like obviously with your job and having to travel, are you able to see your family a ton during the season? Or
I'm lucky where my wife doesn't have a job here in Fort Myers. She does some photography here and there in the off season, and has a few hobbies that she does. But during the season, she is kind enough to move our whole family basically to wherever I go, and she's done that ever since we got married in 2010. And I think that helps out a lot because other than the fact she doesn't really get to go on road trips anymore because of the baby, but I get to see her every homestand for the most part, and she's always made a point to be there, when we are at home. So, I think last year for the 10 starts that I was up with Minnesota, she was able to go on a lot of the road trips, so I was able to see her a lot more. But obviously things got a little bit more complicated, with a 3 and 4 month old.
so did you notice? I mean, obviously in those 10 starts that you made in the big leagues, and like Seth asked, how it changed things. Coming home, I mean, it kind of, like keeping things in perspective, coming home from whether it was a really good game or a not so good game, having the family there, and especially having a kid there now, did that change, your mentality away from the ballpark? Was it easier to let that, the good stuff or the bad stuff, was it easier to let that go?
I think one thing, I took my lumps in college about my fair share of times in Missouri, and my parents were generous enough and kind enough to basically travel and drive because my dad doesn't fly, so they drove everywhere we played, and I figured out pretty early in my freshman year that whenever I give up runs, which is going to be often, I'm going to give up runs, and I just kind of made the decision that I wasn't going to allow that to impact me off the field because I only get so much time with my parents, as they drove all that way to see me. And I think that's one thing that's just kind of stuck with me, and I try to make sure that when I leave the locker room and when I leave the field, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, and I try to leave that there. It's not easy all the time, that's for sure. But I think one thing that always makes it a little bit easier, especially after you give up 7 to the Angels or a bunch to the Tigers, it's pretty cool to look at the phone post game and check out a picture of your daughter and just kind of reset your mindset. And I think it allows me to get over that start a little bit better, like you said, and move on to the next one.
I think that's a fantastic perspective to have for no matter what you do. I mean, I teach, so being able to even leave that is a difficult thing
Sure.
to do. And Seth, I'm sure you think about your job when you're not at your job, and being able to train yourself. And I mean, there's only 50-some 8-year-olds watching me do my job, not thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on the TV. And so, I mean, that mentality is a great thing to have. You should be able to bottle it up and sell it. I think it would probably make you richer than the baseball does.
I think the hard part is as a player, I mean, and especially a starting pitcher, I only get, this year I think I had 30 or 31 starts. So, and I think, probably as fans, it can probably be a little bit frustrating to maybe hear about that nonchalant attitude. But, I mean, I think the perspective from my side is, and hopefully the fans understand that all the players in that locker room want to win every game. And for the past 4 years, nobody's enjoyed losing, and that didn't change this year. But, if with 162 games or 32 starts, however you look at it, if you sit there and bear down and punish yourself over one start or one inning or one batter, it's going to impact, more games than just the one. So I don't want it to come across nonchalant, but at the same time, we talk about perspective, and, whatever allows me to move on from that rough start after I learn from it, is going to help me prepare for the next one.
Absolutely. That's the voice of Kyle Gibson, a right-handed pitcher with the Twins. I want to get to a couple because we only have a few minutes here with Kyle, but a few of the questions we've got at Twins Daily. And the first one comes from SHS_59, and first of all says, love that you're a Twin, and I hope you have a long, durable, successful career with the Twins. But his question is, you're listed at 6'6". Do you find that to be an advantage for being a ground ball guy? You had 2 groundouts per flyout. And do you think it strikes some sort of fear in the hitters, or imposes some sort of a threat with the height, or what do you think the advantage is to the height?
Yeah, I mean, I think the height definitely has, it plays a factor in the groundouts. You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure, you look at a guy like Tim Hudson, I'm sure he gets a lot of ground balls as well, and I don't think he's as tall. But I mean, definitely if I'm able to throw the sinker with, a little bit more tilt, than maybe your average sinker baller, it's definitely going to help. There's no doubt about it. But, I think, part of that is, one thing I was always taught by my dad, who was basically my pitching coach my whole life, was, stay tall through my motion, and that was kind of where I created my angle from a younger age. But yeah, definitely, I think that helps, and that's something that, when I start struggling and when the ball starts, going in the air more than on the ground, that's one thing I definitely look at is, am I staying tall? Am I creating that angle? Because that definitely makes it tough on the hitter.
I want to get to a question here from Nader79, who asks, you pitched in the Arizona Fall League in 2012 and did well. What was that experience like, and do you feel like it helped prepare you for the jump in 2013 to the big leaguers? And then who are a couple of the current major leaguers that you remember facing there?
2012 Fall League was a little bit different for me because, I had just thrown, I was finishing up my Tommy John rehab basically, and I was hoping to get as many innings as possible so that the innings limit the next year would be as high as possible. But, I think I was getting a little bit tired there toward the end. I started off pretty well there in Arizona and had a lot of fun and, learned a lot because, I mean, you're pitching in pretty thin air, although the ballpark's a little bit bigger. You're pitching in pretty thin air against a bunch of guys who can really hit. I don't know that – I'm trying to think. I think Javier Baez was out there with the Cubs. I can't really remember. I know on our team we had Billy Hamilton. Gosh, who else was on that team? I feel like we had a pretty good team. We won the championship that year.
Did you play against Jackie Bradley Jr.?
Nick Franklin. I don't know. Yeah, I faced Jackie Bradley Jr. before. I don't know if it was in the Fall League or not. But, gosh, I mean, I think what prepares you for that is, all these teams send a lot of their best prospects or guys that are, have moved on through the system and are ready to go to the 40-man. That's a good area for them to check them out. And I mean, you just face a lot of guys, who are knocking on the door. So it's a pretty cool opportunity.
Well, just a few more minutes left with Kyle Gibson. So, of course, I came up with some not so short answerable questions, but I mean, Phil Hughes, what do you gain from watching him this year and what he did? And are you behind the scenes? I mean, what are some of the things you learned from him?
Well, if you watch Phil, I mean, he attacks everybody with his fastball really, really good, and it's fun to watch. I mean, I think what it does is it helps me realize that okay, his fastball is obviously maybe a little bit more velocity, and he's got that good riding fastball high in the zone, which I don't execute very well at this point, but I can learn from it and say, okay, well, my fastball is different and it moves maybe a little bit more. So if I locate it like he locates it, I can still have similar success. And I think, when I look back at the starts where I did throw well, a lot of it was probably because I was locating my fastball well and I was getting ahead with my fastball and making it difficult on the hitters because as soon as they get 0-1, 0-2 with fastballs, then they've got to be aggressive and I think that changes the game. And just watching him move that fastball around the zone and not walk anybody was really impressive.
Obviously, Ron Gardenhire let go at the end of the year. Rick Anderson was your pitching coach the last couple of years. Just, what did those guys do for you in your career in the last couple of years? And how much are you paying attention to the, I guess, managerial search that's kind of still underway?
The first part of that question, Gardy and Andy helped me out a lot. I really enjoy pitching for Gardy. The 40 or 45 starts that I did. I was out there for his 1,000th win, I believe, or no, more than that. Which one was it? Man, I don't even remember. It was just a special moment that day in Cleveland. I think it was his 1,000th win.
Yep.
And I mean, there was just it was right at the beginning of my career, and got my first win with Rick Anderson, and he helped me out a lot this year as well. Making adjustments and figuring out how to not only pitch and execute a pitch, but watch what the hitter's doing and being able to watch a swing, as the ball's getting through the zone, and I learned a lot from him. I mean, it was definitely sad to see him go, but I am excited to see who the next manager is going to be, and I don't think I follow it as much. I mean, obviously I'm waiting to hear a decision, but I think it's pretty funny when I get asked, who I think they're going to hire, and my response is always, well, they got rid of the manager this year, they might get rid of the whole team next year, so they're not going to ask us who to hire. So I mean, it is fun to sit back and watch, but it'll be interesting who they hire.
Hey, I had a question that came up on my on the Google page, and it was from I believe Bill Peterson, and he asked how you adjust from the first time through a lineup to the second and the third time through the same lineup.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest difference between maybe the big leagues and AAA is you do have to make clear adjustments to a lot of guys in the lineup versus in AAA you can probably get by with the first and second time executing the same way, but there's different lineups that make it harder on you the second time through. I know the Tigers, they're one lineup that you got to get a lot of those guys out a different way the second time through because they make adjustments quick. That's part of the learning process that I think I still haven't mastered yet. But part of that is knowing my strengths and knowing how well I'm executing those that day. Because the hard part is you can't get away from your strengths so much to where you're pitching only to the hitter's weaknesses, and you're pitching to where you think they're going to be looking for. Because then you end up overthinking things and you end up not pitching your game, which I've done a few times in my career. But that's probably the biggest chess match of the game is as a starting pitcher figuring out how to get through that lineup the third time, especially the third time without giving up any damage.
How much of that is relying on the catcher?
I think a lot of it is. The Suzuki was really good at that, and Joe was really good at that last year as well. They both are very cerebral and they analyze the lineup, to just small details. And Kurt always came up in between innings or as the lineup was turning over, and we would go over certain guys that we needed to change stuff up. And sometimes that second time through it's maybe just getting the hitter to think that you're doing something different. So if I go into Miguel Cabrera's first time the whole time through, maybe I spend the first two pitches of the at-bat going away, and then I can get back in there. There's certain guys where you can do that. And, it's just a chess match. I think that's what makes being a starting pitcher a lot of fun.
Just a couple questions left with Kyle Gibson, and Glenn Perkins talks a lot about advanced stats. And do you look into any of that the way he does, or is some of that the stuff that can maybe get you in trouble on a mound? And how does what the catcher and you discuss relate to some of that?
I think I look at some of it. I think it's definitely working its way into the game. Obviously, I try to not worry too much about the defensive sabermetric side of it, the shifting and everything, because I think there's a lot of times where it works out pretty good. Pitching wise, I don't. I take a look at my numbers every now and then, but I try to not use the numbers as much to analyze my performance. I'd rather go back and look at video and kind of see how I executed each start. Because if I'm executing pitches and they're getting hits, then that's probably translating to batting average in play or the sabermetric to that. So I kind of look. I'm more of a visual guy with the video, so I'd rather do that.
Pace of game is one thing they're addressing in the Arizona Fall League, including the 20-second pitch clock. Last year you were at 22.4. Do you think if they did, and I don't think it'll ever happen, but do you think something like that would help speed up the game, and would that be a good thing?
My average was 22.4.
According to Fangraphs, so I'm not sure if that's from the time you touch it.
We were
That'd
we
be
were
that'd be
sitting in the
great.
dugout.
Yeah.
We were sitting in the dugout one day, timing Ricky Nolasco, I think, and he was like, I don't know, 13 to 18 seconds, each pitch. Um, Man, I didn't realize I was 22.4. I'm going to speed that up this year. I'm sorry that maybe my starts were taking longer than everybody else's. I need to change that.
I'll send you the
Well,
link.
Pelfrey was like 40s. I think Pelfrey's like still doing better than that.
40 seconds.
No, it wasn't. It was like 26, I think. Do you have
Huh.
that one in front of you, Seth?
No, I don't. Just two questions. Fielding, you made some plays going to the third base line and making great throws to first. I think it's fair to say you take some pride in fielding your position.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we work on a lot in spring training, obviously, and I think it's something that even through college, I really wanted to play, a secondary position if I could, and at Missouri, I ended up being pretty glad they didn't because I think I would have been frustrated as a hitter. But yeah, I think Tom Kelly always talks about those plays. If you draw a diamond around the mound, there's a lot of plays that happen in that diamond that can affect the game quite a bit. I just try to do my part as much as possible, and making those balls that can easily start an inning and easily cause some trouble, and trying to turn those into outs.
Last question. It's kind of a two-part question about your off season. Do you watch the World Series? Are you watching the playoffs? I know for me, I struggle because I kind of am a diehard Twins guy, and when that's done, it feels like I put so much into that I struggle to get into it. But I know a lot of people do, and I can imagine as a player where you're literally and actually putting your heart and soul into it. That's another thing. And then secondly, what do you do away from baseball? What are the things you enjoy doing in the off season?
I have been watching the World Series and the playoffs. I think it's I don't know that the way I watch a game might be a little bit different, just because you know I guess I just watch pitchers differently and watch the hitters differently, so I might enjoy the tedious side of the game a little bit more. I wouldn't say that watching baseball doesn't get old because there's times where I just want to get away from it. I think I'm pretty sure I'm rooting for the Royals, but at the same time, the Giants, they were a pretty tough team when we faced them, and they're pretty good as well. So I was talking with Theobar about kind of what we expected in the World Series a couple days ago, and I said I wouldn't be very surprised if it was a sweep by one team, or if I wouldn't be surprised if it went 7 games, but I definitely didn't expect the first game to be 7 or 8-1 like it was. I thought it was going to be all low scoring. I don't know what the score is tonight. I haven't been checking up with it, but and
Royals
then the
are up
second part
big.
to your question, the Royals are up big.
Yeah, they just hit a home run.
Awesome. That's what I like to hear. I think the second part of the question is, especially having Hayden now, who's 7.5 months old. It's that gives me a lot of activity to get away from the game, and getting to catch up, and spend more time with my wife as well on a daily basis. Where normally it's only 4 hours maybe in the morning before I head to the field, and getting caught up with family as well. It's a whole lot easier to see family in the off season and do those things, but it's a little different being playing through September now for the first time. I don't get nearly as much time off. I did my first running today, which gassed me after about 30 minutes, which was kind of embarrassing. But you definitely get a
Is that
little bit
football
less
that you're
time
doing
off.
today?
What?
Were you doing some football today? Is that what I
Yeah,
saw that
yeah.
I read?
The minor league coordinator, strength coordinator, were throwing me some passes so I can work on a little agility. But you just get a little bit less time off, which is okay. I think 3 weeks is enough, and my body's kind of reset, and I'm ready to get back after and start lifting probably in November and throwing in December and getting ready again.
And
I
then
know
it
that Seth
starts right
said
away
that
in February again.
I know that Seth claimed that was the last question, but I can't ever let a guest leave without me talking about the draft because that's kind of the thing that I'm into.
Okay.
So I want to rewind back to 2009. Uh, Coming into the season, obviously I don't know what your expectations were, but your name was always mentioned. along with some other names at the top of the 2009 draft, and you stayed there throughout most of the season. And then, if my memory serves me, was there a forearm issue late in the year?
Yes, I had a stress fracture, which I found out was there about 3 days before the draft.
And you had pitched. Was it in like the conference tournament where the velocity was down, but you still pitched and you still pitched really well? Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, it started hurting me probably, I don't know, with maybe 3 weeks to go in the season, and it kind of just got progressively worse. But it wasn't in my elbow and it wasn't in my shoulder, and honestly, my mindset was, okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? I guess my forearm might break, and that's kind of how I looked at it. And I just said, I'm going to keep taking the ball and going out there and pitching.
So then the draft rolls around. Right, I mean, it's just my forearm. The draft rolls around, and I remember watching it and thinking, if this guy drafts to the Twins, it'd be crazy not to draft him. But whenever the draft is happening and there's injury questions, it's such a crapshoot, So you go 22nd, and then the deadline was much later then, and I remember Seth had you on his podcast at the time, like on deadline night, right?
Yeah.
So how throughout this whole process, was there ever I'm definitely going back to school, I'm definitely not going back to school? Maybe I mean there's some guys that do the independent route for a year. What was your mindset, or did you just kind of push that away because you knew you weren't going to make a decision until later in the summer?
Well, I mean, I think how they had it set up then, certain guys were going to take longer to sign than other guys. And I think for me, there was no rush to sign because I knew, from what the doctor told me, 8 weeks, is what it was going to take for the stress fracture to heal. And for me, the best thing was to wait until I was healthy before I started negotiating anything. Because obviously if I sign hurt, there's a little bit difference, in what I'm probably worth at the time. So for me, I was willing to just sit there and wait, especially the 8 weeks. And then as we got near the end, I mean, it was just kind of an interesting situation like you went through, being, I would say, a week before the draft, I wasn't talking to anybody past pick 15. And then a week, the 2 days before the draft, I didn't talk to anybody ahead of pick 15 probably. So, I mean, I definitely saw the shift and kind of where I was going to go. I just didn't know, where I was going to fall. And then, when the deadline came around, it was like, okay, obviously I fell because at the time I was injured, but now I'm healthy. So now it was just, my agent and I or my advisor at the time, now agent, was trying to figure out, okay, what is the worth here at pick number 22, and just trying to maximize that. I mean, I think I don't know that I really ever planned on going back to school. I think it was a possibility, but at the same time, I knew that I was 21. I was, ready to go and start my career, and that was what I wanted to do. It was just more about, trying to find a number where the Twins agreed and I agreed that, that was a good place to go.
And at that time, anybody that signed over slotted, it was basically not approved until that night. So even though guys you knew were going to sign, they couldn't be announced. And now with the rules changing, things happen a lot quicker. And I, for one, am a big fan of those rules. But, I mean, I think it would be stressful on, college kids, high school kids, that it's basically 2 months here to make a decision that's going to impact the rest of your life. And it's crazy, and the whole draft thing is crazy. Like you said, you went from being weak all because of your forearm, and that's just a crazy thing. And it's a story that I like to hear from everybody because everybody's going through something different.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the new rules have created the situation that happened with the Astros, where it's impacting kids in the negative way as well. And having those draft picks, and I understand all the rules in the CBA and why they're doing it. But there's a couple kids that ended up not getting a chance to play, because of the first rounder not signing for what the Astros thought he was going to sign for, and you've heard that story and you know that story. So that's the interesting side of the new rules that I don't know if they're going to sort out or what they're going to do here in a couple of years, but that's kind of unfortunate.
Right,
Kyle. I want to thank you again for coming on tonight. I know we really appreciate it, even if we took a little extra time of yours. But hopefully you can get a good night's sleep. Your baby lets you sleep in a little bit, and enjoy doing that running stuff. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I enjoy. Well, I know I enjoy being a father a lot more than running. So, maybe I'll keep the running down to 30 minutes maximum, and the fathering, 23 hours a day.
There you go. Well,
Yeah,
thanks
Seth and I,
again.
we run about 30 minutes total a week, so.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks a
Thanks
lot.
again. Have a great night. Enjoy
All right,
your
take care.
off season.
All right, you too.
That was fantastic.
Definitely. Kyle's always great, though. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time with the podcasts, and it's always fun to get his perspective on different things. And we did take a little bit too much of his time, but that's all right. He didn't seem to mind.
Was his wife giving him the business in the background, or what?
I don't know. Maybe. No, I don't know.
I hope not. The one question that we didn't address was that he said he agreed to come to the show as long as we named our next born after him. Did you see that on Twitter or
He's kind of
not?
taking care of that, although I think it's two separate names.
Well, it's his name with an R at the end. It's basically the same.
Kinda.
And I can't have one kid named the same as another kid with one letter different. That's crazy talk.
Well, it's separate names though, so it's totally different.
It's really not. Anywho, there's so much else going on in the Twins world right now that we should talk about.
Let's do it.
Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're in the no news time of Major League Baseball. When the World Series is going on, you can't talk. You can't do other stuff except for on the off days, unless you Twins. They just can't stay out of the news because they did two things today. They declined Jared Burton's option, which was it was either they were going to pay him $3.6 million to pitch, or give him $200,000 to not pitch. And they chose to give him $200,000 to not pitch.
And I don't think
any
either of
surprise
us
there?
are surprised about that.
Absolutely. The other move that they made was maybe a little bit more of a surprise, but not that big of a surprise, and that was that Chris Johnson was sold to a Japanese club for mid six figures. So I think we're probably talking, $400,000 potentially, and he will make seven figures to pitch in Japan. So sounds like a good deal for both parties involved. Chris Johnson was probably going to make major league minimum if he made the major leagues, otherwise make a minor league salary. So he stands to make a bunch more money, and the Twins gain that roster spot for a pitcher that probably, well, in your opinion, was going to be knocked off the 40-man. I thought he was going to stay on, so you were right. I was wrong. But they made two roster moves today. Yeah, it does. They made two roster moves to get their 40-man now down to 36.
Yeah, I mean, on the Johnson thing, I think, like you said, I expected him to come off the 40-man roster. But, we talk about Pino and Bernier came off a week ago. Johnson, maybe they kept him on kind of knowing that this was an option. That there's teams calling from Japan, and last year it was Andrew Albers from Korea that are asking questions. And if they're going to come off the 40-man roster anyway, why not get something for that? It just makes sense. But it's also, Johnson's a guy that with the Twins starting rotation as it already is for next year, without even thinking of if they add another starter or two, it's pretty full. So this is a good opportunity for him to go. He's 30 already. He's had his chance, or he's had a chance in the big leagues a couple of times. It's good. It's a good opportunity for him to now, go try to make some money. And what we've heard, I think, from Mike Berardino is that it's 7 digits. So, good for him. It's a great deal for both sides.
Right. We make 7 digits too. We just have a decimal that's moved over a couple spots. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you almost live in another country, and now he's got to move to another country.
Well, yeah, but I don't think he becomes a citizen.
You don't either.
Well, yeah, but I don't even go over to Canada, and I live 3 miles from there. So
Is that seriously all this is 3 miles?
I think as the crow flies, I'm probably about 3 miles. But they're less than 6.
That's crazy. The other big news of the day was one that I don't know is a huge surprise, and even the timing, and we can get into that a little bit later. But Mike Berardino reported that Mason Melitakis underwent Tommy John surgery last week. Melitakis was in New Britain and put on the disabled list in late July, and with elbow inflammation, I think is what they called it, and it was signified on the 60-day DL. Well, he was activated, I want to say, later that month, and began pitching again, and was initially put in the assignments to the Arizona Fall League, where he was then removed after word had come out that he was still having some elbow issues. We hadn't heard anything for about a month, and now we hear that he had Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate, but I mean they probably handled it right. I mean it's like, if they didn't see anything in the MRI, and they don't necessarily see anything in the MRI. They rehabbed it. It felt better. He pitched the last couple of weeks of the season, and then he came back and did. It's similar to the Sano thing. You almost had to test it to find out, is there something there? They tried to rehab for a month, and yet now they got it done here in mid-October, which puts him on the same timeline as many others, including, I think Kyle Gibson had his in, earlier mid-November. Several others have had it on that same schedule. So he's likely to miss most of next season, although it's very rehab. Maybe get into a couple of GCL games and then go from there. So, he is pretty much a bullpen guy at this point. I think they've made that transition. He only made 2 starts or maybe 3 starts in 2014 while he was with Fort Myers. So, I mean, the change to the bullpen may help him be able to get back a little quicker, too. Obviously, with Tommy John, there's no way to know for sure with recovery.
Right, and I guess my thing was, if he would have, if something would have happened, or whatever the case was, if they'd have thought Tommy John surgery was something that was potentially on the table at the beginning of August, if you have that surgery in August, you're not going to pitch much in 2015.
Right.
So if you rest and rehab, which he did, for a part of August, and then, did his other stuff, and then instructional league popped back up, and has a surgery in October, he's still not going to pitch much in 2015, and we're looking at spring training 2016. And that's either essentially 18 months or 16 months, or is it even more than that he'll have to rehab. And, a lot of times I think I'm critical on how the Twins handle things with elbows. For example, Sano, they shut him down for 3, 4, 5 months, and then had him try it, and then it tore. If it's 2 months, that really doesn't change the timeline that dramatically. So in this case, I think they probably did the right thing. Obviously, when something happens, Twins necessarily change their plan, but if there's not baseball to be played, you can't really change what you do. So in this particular situation, I think they probably handled it as well as they could have, and I think he'll compete for a big league spot, in the bullpen in the summer 2016.
Yeah, I think that's realistic. Again, obviously, there's no way to know. If they would have felt that Tommy John was truly an option at that time in August, they wouldn't have let him come back. They would have had him continue to rehab and all that kind of stuff, and see whether there was any improvement. Typically, what I've heard they've kind of been doing is let him rehab a month, try to get rid of some of the swelling. But if it's not better within a month or so, and by that October or November timeline, then they've been pretty much doing it. Now the other side of that is like Fernando Romero, who I think it was late June when they decided that his elbow was bad. He had surgery within about 3 weeks.
Right.
So they it's not like they have a set plan, and there shouldn't be just a set plan. So I mean, it is individual cases, and I mean, without knowing any of the details, neither of us is a doctor. I can't see anything that tells me they did anything wrong. So it's just it happens. Tommy John, unfortunately, is a big part of baseball right now.
Yeah, and just looking at his game log, he's pitched on. He got one out on August 2nd, and then came back and made an appearance on August 21st and got roughed up in one inning, gave up 3 runs, and then pitched on the 25th for an inning and on the 27th for an inning and a third, and then was shut down again after that. So, yeah, I mean, it's an unfortunate deal, but it's something that's real. We did have a question about Jared Burton, and while we're talking about the bullpen, this might be the best time to talk about it. Nader79A asked, with the buyout of Burton, does this open up a spot for a power arm like Nick Birdie to make the Twins out of spring training, or do you think he spends a little more time at Chattanooga or Rochester? I think Malatakis was a name that came up as a potential replacement for Dunsing at some point, not necessarily right away, but his name, Birdie's name, Zach Jones, Jake Reed, really a lot of these guys are now fighting for an eventual spot in the Twins bullpen.
Yeah, but I don't think it happens right away. I mean, they've got plenty of options unless they were to, non-tender Anthony Swarzak and Brian Dunsing and maybe, non-tender a couple other guys or something, maybe make a trade. But, I mean, right now, in my opinion, Birdie is going to start in Double-A. Reed is going to start either at Fort Myers or in Chattanooga. Zach Jones probably starts in Chattanooga. And you go in the big leagues with guys like Ryan Presley and Michael Tonkin and Lester Oliveros potentially, or other guys, until those other guys do something above A ball. I mean, there's absolutely no rush. I mean, you maybe Reed and probably Birdie come to spring training, but I don't think that either one of them has a legit chance to actually make it out of camp. But I would fully expect both of them, if they continue to do well, I think they could all three be up relatively quickly, meaning mid-summer, So, I mean, I don't think this decision to not pick up Burton's option affects those guys in any way. It just is good business. I mean, some people may say it's cheap to not pay the extra money and save the money and just give them, you're saving $3.4 million. I mean, it's just good baseball. You'll put someone in there who will do just as well.
Right. Now, obviously, with Birdie finishing the year at Fort Myers and Jake Reed finishing the year in Cedar Rapids, I think, most people would project them to say, okay, well, they move up a level. Birdie starts at Chattanooga, Reed starts at Fort Myers, and that's just how we go forward with our business. Given that Jake Reed is in Arizona and doing well, how would you match them up on the big leagues right now?
Well, you kind of cut out there a little bit, but I would agree that Birdie starts in Chattanooga. I think Reed likely starts in Fort Myers, but if he continues to pitch this well and maybe he gets an invite or something like that, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility for him to go to New Britain as well. I mean, I think he's a guy that their confidence in sending him to the Arizona Fall League tells me that they wouldn't be opposed to moving him quite quickly, and that might be a jump to Double-A right away. So as far as future, I mean, in between Birdie and Jones and Reed, I mean, I've talked to people. Birdie can be a closer. I think Zach Jones can be a good closer or eighth inning guy. And I think there's people that think that Jake Reed would be more of a seventh or eighth inning type of guy, maybe not quite up at that other level, but at the same time still potentially dominant, throwing in the upper 90s. And as Jason Kanzler told us last week, with good tail and movement. So, I mean, those three are setting up to be a pretty good back end of the bullpen, along with Glenn Perkins and maybe Michael Tonkin, who quote unquote only throws 95, 96.
Yeah, for sure. Um, if you could go to Vegas right now and put money on Chattanooga to win the Southern League title, how much would you put on them?
I'd probably put a little bit, but at the same time, a lot of those guys have the potential to move up pretty quickly and not be there during the playoffs. So that might be one where they're about 2-1 favorites, and it's going to be hard to actually make your money because there's a good chance that a lot of guys move.
That's title in Elizabethton and in Fort Myers, and they were had the best record in the Midwest League. So at this point, I'd just take my chances.
Yeah, and I'm not. They'd certainly be the favorite, I would think. But at the same time, when it comes to the playoffs, Sano and Buxton and Rosario and probably Birdie and maybe Reed and some of those pitchers, whether it's Taylor Rogers, Jason Wheeler, Tyler Duffy, if they start the year there, I can see them moving up again to AAA. So, I mean, that's the only reason that I might not put any money on it. But that team, I mean, if anyone wants to make a trip for an opening day. First of all, Cedar Rapids is pretty close, and I'm really hoping to be in Cedar Rapids for their opening day. But if you can get to Chattanooga for their opening day or sometime during their opening month, that might be a fun team to watch.
No kidding. Hey, but here's the thing. You named a bunch of guys. None of those guys played for Fort Myers when they were winning the title.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking of that as I was saying because you'd have Harrison and Walker and Kepler still, and you'd have some of those pitchers that did well for them, and Stuart Turner and Mitch Garver could be up there by that time, and Levi Michael. So yeah, I mean you're right. That's still a talented team, and that just speaks to the future and the depth of prospects, not just the high end, but the depth of prospects that the Twins have. So I know there's a lot of people out there that are really negative about the Twins right now, and understandably so after 4 really tough years. I mean, even the players understand that fans can be frustrated at this time. But it's hard. I mean, you can only be negative for so long. At least that's my opinion. And I just think there's so many reasons for optimism, even if you're under the impression, and rightfully so, that not every prospect's going to make it to the big leagues or be a star in the big leagues or even a role player. There's just so much depth that you just feel good about the odds of being able to field 8 position players and several pitchers and a good bench and all of that. So I don't know. I guess I'm encouraged by the direction that they're going.
Yeah, I guess if you just look at the potential Chattanooga lineup, and I think when I just looked at it, a guy like Travis Harrison might not have a spot to start the year. A guy like Nico Goodrum might not have a spot to start the year, just in their starting lineup, because you'd have, and I'm not even looking at the roster here, but you'd have Stuart Turner probably at catcher. Dalton Hicks would make sense there. And then you have Levi Michael, Jorge Polanco, and Sano. And then you could potentially have Buxton, Rosario, and then just pick the guy you want. You want Kepler, you want Walker, you want Harrison. I mean, that's a heck of a lineup. And like you said, they're not all going to pan out, but if that's not the most talented team in minor league baseball, I'd like you to show me the one that is.
Yeah, and like I said, there's some pitchers at that level. Barry will start there, and the guys we talked about in the bullpen. So, I mean, that's just a loaded team. And there's some really good pitchers that ended the year in Fort Myers in their rotation or in their bullpen that may have to go back there because there's just so much talent in the upper levels. So I'm really curious where they go with minor league signings this year because, as you know, sometimes that creates a trickle down a little bit. A guy like A.J. Octor last year started in New Britain and was there for about a week and a half before moving up, in part because of bringing in some guys and having even more depth. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting this offseason.
The next thing on our list here, let me make sure I'm looking at it right, is I think about the managerial the search that's going on, and I think Lavelle tweeted yesterday that it's down to 3. The 2 internal candidates, Molitor and Minkiewicz, and then the one outside candidate, Torey Lavallo. Lavallo?
Yeah.
I think I ask you every week if I'm saying it right. And then I don't know if you saw on Twitter today, was it John Hyman or Heyman from CBS that was talking about Minkiewicz saying, all he does is win, and thought it was very un-Twins-like that Minkiewicz would say that, and maybe that didn't hurt himself in the selection process. Did you read that article?
I saw it and I kind of thought it was ridiculous. I mean, all the quote from the Berardino article was saying was, I've got a track record, and everywhere I've gone, I've been part of winning teams. At coaching the last couple of years, and throughout his playing career, he played on winning teams. And I think, and obviously I'm not part of the managerial decision making, but I certainly think that one of the goals they have for the Twins is to continue to win and to have that attitude, and he definitely has always had that attitude. I don't see it as a negative. I think it's much ado about nothing.
Right, and that's how I felt too. Is there any situation that you see, you know, someone is just a general question, um, if one of those three gets the job, what happens to the other two? Now, I think that if Molitor gets the job, that Lavallo is, going to stay in his position, that he wouldn't be coming back, or he wouldn't be coming over for anything but the managerial job, as he shouldn't. But let's say that one of the other two gets the job. Will the other one stay on, or will they just go somewhere else?
Well, first I would agree that Lavallo would go back to the bench coach with the Red Sox, and from what we've read from their beat writers, the Red Sox beat writers,
Right.
he's been given an extension to continue talking, so which means they're fully supportive of him doing this as long as need be. But to your point, then, I think if Molitor gets the job, and this is based on an interview that Doug Minkiewicz did with Patrick Royce 3-4 weeks ago, I mean, I think it just makes sense, and I think it pretty clear that Minkiewicz is likely moving up to Chattanooga. I mean, that definitely sounded like it was in the works, so I think he sticks around. Really, there's no reason for him to move. There aren't other managerial positions open and that kind of stuff. So, but then, the other side of it is Molitor's already like 58 or 59, and maybe he would only want to be doing this for, say, a 3 to 5 year period, in which case Minkiewicz would maybe be groomed for that with another year at a higher level with these guys, and then move him up to the big league coaching staff. I mean, there could be a progression there. Now, if it goes the other way, if Minkiewicz got the job, I would be very surprised if Molitor stuck around. I think he would stay involved with the organization, but I don't necessarily think he would want to be a bench coach or that kind of thing for someone. So I think if Molitor gets it, Minkiewicz stays in the minor league organization and eventually moves up to the big leagues in some capacity. Whereas if Minkiewicz gets the job, I think Molitor is probably done as a coach. I don't know. Do you agree? Is that?
Yeah, that's the way that I've kind of viewed it from the get-go. The other interesting note that I saw was, and I can't think of the guy's name, the guy that writes for the Rochester beat writer.
Jim Mandolero?
That's the guy. He had written something about Gene Glynn longer in the running for the Twins managerial job, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he'll come back to Rochester. Molitor got the job, that Gene Glynn would maybe be his third base coach, which I guess is not a crazy thought. He could be very easily a guy that makes it onto the staff. So there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall, and you could speculate a lot, but it'll be interesting to see how this all. It sounds like tomorrow would be a day that teams could potentially announce things, but it doesn't sound like the Twins are going to announce a manager tomorrow either.
Yeah, someone actually asked me about how the minor league coaching staff would figure itself out, whoever the manager is. And I think, my answer was, If Molitor becomes the manager, I mean, no matter what, I think Gene Glynn moves up to the coaching staff, whether it's bench coach or third base coach. I mean, he's been a big league third base coach for, a dozen years over the last 2 decades. So, I mean, it's not like that would be new to him, and he'd be a terrific bench coach, too. I think Jeff Smith moves up to Rochester. I think Minkiewicz moves to Chattanooga. I think Jake Mauer gets to decide whether he wants to go back to Fort Myers or stay in Cedar Rapids. And, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if Tommy Watkins gets to manage the other team. I think there will be some changes. So, I mean, it definitely, like you said, it'll be very interesting to see how that trickle-down effect comes into play.
Yeah, and we really just don't know exactly how this is all going to work out. If it's not Thursday, which is tomorrow, I think the next day that they could announce something would be Monday. Do you see that happening or not?
You know what? I really don't think they're going to interfere with the World Series as much as that's kind of silly. I'm guessing it would be more Wednesday, Thursday of next week.
Hey, wait. The World Series will probably be done.
Well, right.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not. I guess it'll go back 1-1.
Go until Wednesday.
Right. That's true. I was thinking it was going to be San Francisco finishes at San Francisco, and if they win all three, it'll be done Sunday. But with the Royals looking like they're going to even it up tonight, yeah, that'll probably. Moving on, this is something that you could talk about because I didn't listen to the interview, but apparently Glenn Perkins did the 1500 podcast, and he talked about pitching to contact.
Well, as you know, I pretty much listen to all the Twins podcasts, and I listen to the Sports Over Beers podcast with Derek Wetmore and Phil Mackey, and it's an hour long, and it's worth listening to because, Perkins really does give a good perspective on analytics, on, Terry Ryan, and on many topics, including, he was asked, what's it like to have to play ball for that much money and to have that kind of security. I mean, they asked him some interesting questions, but the one I thought was interesting was, I think it was Phil Mackey asked Perkins, at any time during your minor league time with the Twins or in the big leagues, has a pitching coach told you to pitch to contact? And Perkins immediately said, no, absolutely not. So they said, is that a real thing? And he goes, yeah, it's kind of like the Twins way. It's there. It's a good media slogan. And then he talked a little bit about, I can get some strikeouts, but I look at situations too and say, you know what, if there's a runner on first, I'd love to get out of this with a double play. So I'm going to throw him a two-seamer down and in, and I know he's going to hit the ball to second, and I know Dozier's going to make the play and turn it into a double play. And so the idea, he said, is to pitch sometimes to weak contact, and it's one of those. And he goes, but that's not quite as cool a name as pitch to contact. Pitch to weak contact isn't as exciting. And it's my theory on pitch to contact has always been that it's not like they're sitting there telling people not to strike people out. My idea of pitch to contact is get ahead, throw strikes, don't walk people, but also don't throw it right down the middle. Make good strikes, throw good pitches right on the corners or just off the corners, mix up your pitches. They're going to hit it. People are not going to strike out all the time, and there's nothing wrong with strikeouts, but Johan Santana threw a ton of strikes, and he got ahead, and he mixed it up with fastball changeup. He just got a lot of strikeouts because he was that good. Phil Hughes didn't walk anybody. He pitched to contact, but his stuff was such that he actually had his highest strikeout rate this year, in his career. So, I mean, it's not like they're telling Phil Hughes, don't want to strike people out, but Phil Hughes was working the corners and working quick and throwing strikes and mixing it up and moving it all over the place. I mean, that's pitch to contact too. You just happen to get more strikeouts. So it's been one of my pet peeves as it relates to Twins and kind of some of those myths I really feel that there are in the system, this pitch to contact thing. And for Perkins to answer the question as he did, I thought it was just a great illustration of kind of along my thoughts on the topic, and obviously he lives it. So I don't know. I just go listen to the Sports Over Beers podcast that has Glenn Perkins on it. It's at 1500ESPN.com. I think it's worth listening to.
Here's my question though: is there any pitcher that doesn't pitch to contact? I mean, nobody strikes everybody out or walks everybody. There's always going to be contact. I mean, that's the thing that we heard so much about Cole Stewart is, well, he doesn't strike anybody out. His strikeouts are so low, but what does he do? He doesn't let anybody hit it hard.
Right.
And so I mean, you can get a weak ground out on 2 pitches. Isn't that better than striking a guy out on 3?
Or 5. I mean, because a lot of times when you strike a guy out, he's going to fall off a couple of pitches, and you're going to try to sneak a slider off the corner that they don't swing at. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love strikeouts. They're great. But, first of all, they're not always realistic. There's guys that aren't going to strike out more than 35 times a season. I mean, that's less now than it was in the 40s, 50s. The other point they made on there, I think Phil made it as well, was, back then, a guy like Jim Cotta, I think he said, only struck out like 4.7 per 9 innings. And even Bert Blyleven, who I think was the number 3 strikeout person when he retired, over his career, he only averaged like 6.8 strikeouts per 9 innings. And that kind of tied in with the question that they talked about with the pace of game. Hitters weren't up there trying to take walks. They were trying to hit the ball. Pitchers were catching the ball and throwing it. I don't know. It was just really interesting, and I agree. A pitcher should pitch to strikes. It's just the pitch to contact thing became a slogan, and there's people that want to be negative about everything the Twins do and say, and they chose to make that into this negative connotation when in reality there isn't a pitching coach out there that isn't telling pitchers to get ahead and throw strikes. And if you strike people out, great, but let's throw strikes and work quick,
Right. The last thing that's on the agenda for tonight is yesterday. Was it yesterday or was it 2 days ago that the Twins Daily Off-Season Handbook was made available for pre-order?
Correct.
And I have only looked briefly at the part of the Terry Ryan interview, which is quite an interview, and I mean that's been my favorite part of the handbook. It's been my favorite part of the handbook every year you guys have done it. So, right now it's available for pre-sale. I think it's $3.99. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what's going on in there?
Yeah, and we're just kind of finishing up, doing some of that final editing and stuff like that. But you're right. I mean, the big thing I think is that Terry Ryan interview, and like I said, it's like 30 pages. Parker had a chance to talk to Terry Ryan for an hour last week, and then we did some transcribing. But there were some interesting things that came out of that. But beyond that, we've got some free agents from positions of need that the Twins could look after, a couple of trade types of options. And what we did differently this year was similar to what the Twins or every other front office has to do. In past years, we each came out with our own individual blueprint, and this year we kind of melded them all into one, and that's what kind of has to happen in the real life, that I may have my ideas, and Nick Nelson may have his ideas, and Parker Hageman may have his ideas, but when you have to kind of bring that all together and actually come up with a team, or in this case, a individual blueprint, it creates some really interesting conversation, and that's what this book is about. We've done it 4 or 5 years now, and it creates a lot of discussion among Twins fans. People get the book, and then they read through it, and they start thinking about their own blueprint and what they would do. But it also goes into arbitration decisions and guys who would have to be added to the 40-man roster, and a lot of things that we'll be talking about here at Twins Hangouts throughout the off season. So, we brought the price down a little bit. It's $3.99 until not next Monday, but the following Monday. What is that? November 3rd or something. It'll be coming out. At that point, I think it goes up to $5.49. So, if you want actually tonight, Wednesday night or Thursday morning. If you check out twinsdaily.com, Parker's going to do a little bit of an article, and we'll, I believe, provide a little bit of a sample of that Terry Ryan interview. Like I said, it's 30 or 32 pages worth, and I think the sample will be a couple pages of those. So, it'll be interesting how it is interesting. So I hope people enjoy that.
And as we're talking about off-season handbooks, the Twins prospect handbook is underway. As it always is. I think we got a little bit quicker start on it this year than we have in the past, but we're definitely working on that, and we hope to have it set to go by the beginning of December-ish, right? Is that kind of what we're targeting?
And I think it's still what we're kind of on pace for.
Okay. And we'll have more talks about that as we progress through these next 6 weeks-ish. But yeah, look for that as well, and that'll be available again in paperback and the digital one as well. The only other thing really to talk about now is there's some winter leagues going on, and I know Aaron Hicks is playing in Venezuela, and I think he started off pretty well. I haven't looked at the stats here for a couple of days, but I can bring them up. At one point, his OPS is like 1,100, but obviously after 5 games, that doesn't really paint a great picture. So it looks like right now he's played in 7 games with a .318 batting average and an OPS just short of 900, if that's the most updated stats. And I also want to say that his splits suggest that he's hitting left-handers okay too. So, currently versus left-handed hitters in only 6 at-bats. So I guess that really doesn't tell you anything. Oh, no, excuse me. Against right-handers in 16 at-bats, he has 5 hits, including a home run. He's walked 5 times and taken 3 strikeouts. So as a left-handed hitter, which he struggled with so much, he's batting .313 with a .476 on-base percentage, 500 slugging, and .976 OPS. That is only 16 at-bats, so he could go 0 for 3, 0 for 4. He goes 0 for 4 and he's down to 250, which changes, the perspective on things. So we wait on that one a little bit before we talk too much. But, I guess I didn't expect him to go anywhere to play up to Venezuela, and getting off to a decent start is an encouraging step for his offseason.
Yeah, I guess good for him. I don't know. He pushed back his wedding for like a month or so to go, so I don't necessarily think that's... I don't know. I guess the Twins must either be pushing him or what, but... And then secondly, anyone that goes to Venezuela, I guess good for them. He and Ryan O'Rourke, who we talked a bit about when we were interviewing A.J. Octor a few weeks ago, they're both in Venezuela right now. Takes courage to go there, that I know. But, it's extra at-bats, it's extra innings. It's not even worth looking at the numbers. It's just getting that time. For Hicks, maybe the numbers matter a little bit more just because, I think obviously next year matters a lot for him as well. But, whether he hits 250 and 60 at-bats or 360 at-bats is probably the difference of 2 or 3 hits. So,
right. Exactly. The other thing that we should talk about briefly here, Byron Buxton is in the Arizona Fall League, and he's currently batting .209. And like you said, numbers don't really matter. But when we're talking about 43 at-bats at this point, 5 runs, 9 hits, including only 1 double, and an OPS at .509. He's only got 2 stolen base, but obviously it's 5 times in 43 at-bats. You're not going to be able to steal bases. So what do you make of Buxton struggling a little bit?
He missed pretty much a whole year. He had a concussion, and he's going up against some pretty good competition right away. So, I mean, if he had four more hits, he'd probably be hitting 280, and we wouldn't worry about it. But he's playing, you know, a lot of the guys will play about every other game. He's playing probably 3 out of 4, and to me, that's encouraging. He just needs to get the at bats. He'll be fine. I mean, he's in a pretty bad streak right now. I think 2 for his last 22 or something like that. But I mean, for him, it's more about getting him back on the field, getting over those concussion symptoms. Obviously, he was cleared to play, but as we know as Twins fans, you can't always just start playing and pick up where he left off. So, I mean, he didn't have a lot of consistent playing time throughout the year. Every time he kind of started going, he'd get hurt. And, this is probably in 10 games over 3 weeks, the most consistent playing time he's had all year. So, I mean, my level of concern about Byron Buxton at this point, even with that 509 OPS, is about 0.
So you don't have any inkling that maybe the expectations that were put on him when he was playing so well at Cedar Rapids were maybe a little bit too high?
I don't know. I mean, he was the number one prospect in all of baseball, and I think he's still top 3. I don't think hitting 209 and 43 at bats changes that. I think the only reason he's not going to be number 1 is because he missed the whole year, but his speed is still there, his strength is still there, his work ethic is still there, everything's still there. He just needs at bats. It's rust. I mean, obviously not every number 1 overall prospect in baseball ends up becoming Mike Trout or whoever other great players are, but I mean, there's zero reason to worry about what he's done so far in this small sample. And really, his 2014 season, he got 124 at bats over about 4 months. I mean, it's just not enough time to really get things going. So I don't think he was overhyped at all.
How about Rosario? Did we start to sell him short when he was suspended and struggling, and now in his 42 at bats, so 1 less than Buxton, same amount of games, same amount of runs, twice as many hits, still only 1 extra base hit. But the stat line that might be most impressive on him is that he's stolen 6 bases in 10 games, has an OPS of 878, and is getting on bases at a 426 clip.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people probably sold him short just based on his 2014 season. You and I tried to make a positive out of him missing 50 games because of that drug suspension, in saying that, well, he played in the Arizona Fall League, and then he goes and plays in Puerto Rico, and then he was in the WBC, and through another season, and it just keeps playing all the time, that maybe he needed a break. But at the same time, we probably undervalued the fact that he did miss spring training, and he did miss 50 whole games. I mean, so that would, somewhat explain the struggles he had even getting going throughout the AA season. But again, it's still just 42, 43 at bats in the Winter League. But I think it was big for him to play well here, almost for himself, and kind of to put himself back on the prospect lists, because the reality is with him, his speed's always been there. His good outfield defense has always been there. He's got a good arm, and he's always been able to have those quick wrists and hit. Maybe we underplayed the amount of rust he would have from missing that much time.
Right. I don't know if it was him last year or if it was someone else that got off to a pretty good start in the Arizona Fall League or in his Winter League. It might have actually been Hicks, and then totally just went south. And I mean, by the time all was said and done, the stats look pretty horrific. So there's still a lot of time, obviously, for Rosario to continue to push it in the right direction. But there's also a lot of time that, whether it's going really well like Rosario is or going really bad like Buxton is, that they could turn things around with, a couple multi-hit games and a couple extra base hits, and we're looking at things entirely differently. Um,
Yeah, I think that might have been Eduardo Escobar in Venezuela last year that
oh yeah, he did
started
have,
out so fast and then just plummeted.
but I don't know that his stats at the end were terrible. I mean, they'd definitely come back down to earth. But I think, it was similar to how he's had this season. Looking
Right.
at his stats at the end, I don't know that they were terrible. Um, but yeah, they definitely weren't as great as they had started off. Um, we have been going. Well, I guess we're a little short because we started a little bit late, but we're at about 75 minutes, I'd say. We had Kyle Gibson on for the first. How long we have? About a half hour, maybe even a little bit longer than that.
Yep.
We've talked about a lot of different things going on with the Twins. Is there anything else you want to talk about tonight before we close up shop?
No, I think those are the main topics, and obviously we encourage people to give us topics each week. We appreciate those that sent us questions. I mean, there's just a lot of the business side goes on here early in the off season, and I think in coming weeks maybe we should spend a little more time on arbitration eligibles and start thinking about some free agent options, and there's going to be these little things like Chris Johnson going to Japan, or Burton's option not being picked up, and I think we both think that obviously there will be several more 40-man roster decisions. So, I mean, I think we're going to have plenty of topics to talk about throughout the off season, and again, we always welcome you guys to leave your feedback at Twins Daily in the comment section, or on Twitter, or however you choose. Are there guests you'd like us to talk to? We talked to Kyle Gibson, we talked to Jason Kanzler. Are there guys you'd like us to try to talk to? And we'll certainly try to do that. So let us know.
Yeah, for sure. If there's any other feedback too that we're not, asking about, we switched the video call to be an audio only call to try to make our audio sound better. If there's anything else that people want to see or want to hear or want us to do, we definitely would take anybody's opinion, just feedback to make this something better, more enjoyable. Because that's what we're trying to do here. So at this point, I think we'll call it an evening. I believe next Tuesday night we should be good to go again. And then just keep an eye on the Twitter feed. Follow us at Twins Hangouts, or follow either of our personal accounts so we can keep you informed about when the show will happen. So thanks for joining us. Seth, you want to say anything before we sign off?
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you to Kyle Gibson again. I've had him on many podcasts going back to previous years. Jeremy, you brought up the night that he needed to sign. He was on our podcast with me for about a half an hour, up till about an hour before he needed to sign, and he hadn't signed yet. So, just that kind of stuff, and he's always willing to answer questions, and obviously just a good guy, great family. That was pretty clear too. So we thank him for coming on and obviously giving us a little extra time. So thank you to Kyle Gibson. Thanks, Jeremy. And thanks, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, download us on iTunes if you missed the first part, and let us know what you think, and we will see you next Tuesday night. Thanks for hanging out.